Hello everyone, welcome back to another guide video. Today I am going to be explaining, well I guess not explaining, it's more running you guys through some of the useful weapons for each mastery rank. This guide only goes up to mastery rank 10, but there are weapons that are locked up until mastery rank like 15, and then even some more above that for prime weapons. But for the most part, we're just going to master rank 10, because kind of after that point, you can start experimenting yourself, because you'll have the resources, you'll have the experience, and you'll be able to get most of the other weapons, excluding the 5 from master rank 11 through master rank 15, sorry. So we're just going to start off with master rank 1, or 0, sorry, I apologize. Now, most of the time, you don't really need to work through these ones, because you'll be master rank 1, maybe even 2, with the base weapons in Warframe. But I will go through Master Rank 0 and up. I won't skip any Master Ranks, just so if you want to get some of these, you're more than welcome to. Obviously, you don't have to get these at this exact Master Rank. You don't have to get them at all if you don't want to. These are just recommendations for some alright weapons. Obviously, not all of them are amazing, but none of them are horribly bad. But these are just some recommendations for some weapons for each Master Rank if you want something to work towards. So for Master Rank 0, I will work through the primary weapons, and then the secondary weapons, and the melee weapons. I'll do this for every Master Rank. So the primary weapons, the 3 we've got in Master Rank 0 that are somewhat useful to work towards would be the Bratin, which is just your usual assault rifle. You've got the Latron, which is like a semi-automatic rifle. And then you've got the Burstin, which is a burst rifle. It's your basic 3 types of fire modes. They're very basic weapons, but they all output some amounts of damage that will be quite useful for you early game. Moving on to secondary weapons, there's only 2 in Master Rank 0 that I've seen that are somewhat useful, those being the Kraken and the Lato. Both single shot weapons, obviously both pistols, but they both output some amounts of damage. The Lato can also be outright bought with just credits. You don't have to buy the blueprint and craft it, so that makes it a bit easier. Moving on to melee now, you've got 3 here that are, again, somewhat useful. You've got the Fang, which are 2 like dual daggers. You've got the Scanna, which are one of the weapons you can pick in the tutorial. And you've got the Lecta, which is like an electric whip. The Lecta used to be very useful in the past. It was a meta weapon that had huge range, and you could just slide attack with it and kill like heaps of enemies in a defense mission. But obviously they nerf that because they nerf all fun things. But it's still a very strong weapon, it's still a very useful weapon, so if you decide you want to work towards those, you're more than welcome. Next, we'll move on to Master Rank 1. So there's 2 weapons in the primary section, those being the Carrack and the Strun. So the Carrack is like an upgrade to the Bratin. It's again just an automatic assault rifle, but it's quite a bit stronger than the Bratin. And then you've got the Strun, which would be the first shotgun you can unlock. Excluding the Mark 1 weapons, so there are lots of different Mark 1 weapons, but they are also like the Lato, they can be outright bought with credits, but they're just not very good at all. So don't worry about getting those, just skip past those and buy blueprints for the other weapons. Secondaries for Master Rank 1, there's no new secondaries, sorry, it's still just the ones for Master Rank 0, you don't unlock any at Master Rank 1. Moving on to melee though, there's one I saw that was somewhat useful, being the dual Kamas. These are not too bad. Again, they're low mastery rank, so you won't find great weapons until probably mastery rank 3 or so. But they're still not bad to use, and it'll keep you going. Moving on to mastery rank 2, for primary, you've got the Boar, which is, again, a shotgun like the Strun. The Boar is a drop from a certain enemy, so you won't be able to buy that blueprint, just play the game as usual until you get the Boar's blueprint. But this is here in case you get it early game. It is a pretty useful shotgun. And then you've got the Baltor, which is probably as good as the Carrack, if not better. The only difference being it is projectile instead of hit scan. So you shoot and you've got to kind of track your targets and aim in front of them, because it won't hit exactly where you're aiming as soon as you shoot. It's obviously got a projectile with travel distance. But again, it is a very strong weapon for early game. For secondary, there are 3 I've got here. The first one being the Hiku, which is throwing stars, your usual assassin ninja stuff. You've then got the Sonicor, which is a little hand cannon. It's quite funny, like it's not too bad. And then you've got the kunai, which again is other throwing. It's not throwing stars. These are throwing knives. You can get the Mark 1 kunai when you first start the game. These are just the upgraded version that you can buy the blueprint for. Next, we move on to the Fragor, or melee, sorry. First one being the Fragor, which is a giant ass hammer. For anyone that likes heavy weapons, you've got the Fragor. You've also got the Gram, which is just a heavy sword. Huge sword as well. That one's also very strong. You've also got the Skindo, which is another heavy weapon. This one's a giant axe. You can tell they're going through all the themes here. And then the fourth one is Orthos, which is like a staff, like a pole. Similar to the Mark 1 bow you can get at the start of the game with the tutorial. But instead, this one's a lot stronger than that. Moving on to Mastery Rank 3. For the primary, the only somewhat useful one I saw was the Volcar, which is a sniper. So if you're a lover of snipers, I definitely recommend getting that one. Next is secondary. There are 3 here I've got. The first one being the Aquato, the second being the Lex, and the third being the Sicarus, or the Sicarus. I'm not good with pronunciations. The Aquato are obviously just the dual version of the Lato you can get back at Master Rank 0. The Lex is like an upgraded version of the Lato. Same again, single pistol, just shoots single bullets. And then the Sicarus is I think it's a 3-round burst pistol. So it's a little burst pistol. It's quite cool. And they're not too bad for that master rank. For melee, we've got quite a few here. So we've got the dual heat swords. You will get the heat sword from, I believe it's the Earth to Venus junction, or the Venus to Mercury, one or the other. You'll get the heat sword from that. I'd advise building that one as well when you can. But the dual heat swords are just 2 heat swords instead of 1 more damage. You've got the Galatine, which is again just a giant sword. It's similar to the Gram, but stronger. This is one of the weapons I always recommend to anyone at Master Rank 3. And then you've got the Heat Dagger. So if the Heat Sword is too slow for you, you can always pick the Heat Dagger. Obviously more attack speed, less range. You've got the Cronin, which are, again, another weapon I always recommend to people. High damage, high speed, so they attack quite fast. And there's 2 of them. Why wouldn't you want 2 weapons? And finally, you've got the Thipido, which is similar to the Orthos, another staff. It's got slightly less range, I believe, but it's by no means weaker. It's quite strong as well. The Thipido does require other weapons to craft it, though, is the only problem. So, if you like your Orthos, I would just stick with the Orthos for now. Master Rank 4. The only primary weapon I've got here is the Heck. A very, very strong shotgun. If you love shotguns, I'd absolutely recommend crafting this and sticking with this for a while, because it's a very good shotgun. Secondary, you've got Aklex, you've got the Vasto. Those 2 are not bad. The Aklex obviously is the upgraded version of the Lex. There's 2 instead of 1. And the Vasto it's like a revolver type weapon. It shoots quite fast. It's not got crazy high damage, but again, for this master rank, it's not bad at all. For melee here, we've got the bow, which is the better version of the Mark 1 bow. As I say, all Mark 1 weapons are pretty abysmal. Just try not to go near them unless you need mastery rank. Next, you've got the Baltace, which is similar to the Cronin, but it's like built out of the Baltor instead. It's quite cool looking. But the Cronin is still stronger, but the Baltace is a nice weapon. I'd absolutely recommend getting it if you need it. Next, you've got the Guandao, which is probably the strongest staff weapon that we've come across so far. The Guandao is a very high crit chance, and then obviously you can beef up the crit damage as well, and you can do quite a bit of damage with the Guandao. So if you need a high damage weapon, this would definitely be the weapon to go for at this point. There's also the Nikana. So there's quite a few versions of the Nikana. You've got the Nikana, and then you've got the Dragon Nikana, which we will cover later on. And then you've got Nikana Prime. So Nikana Prime is one of the highest slash weapons in the game. It does so much damage. The Nikana is like the baby version of the Nikana Prime. It's still very strong. It is still very, very good. But the Nikana Prime obviously is a lot better. But I'd absolutely still recommend getting the Nikana. And then when we cover it later on, getting the Dragon Nikana as well, because they are both very, very useful weapons. Next, you have the Redeemer. So I do like to say that just about all gunblades in this game are quite strong, like very, very strong. People tend to build them for a heavy build, with lots of different mods. I can always cover that in another guide at some point. But it builds for like combo duration and combo chance and stuff. Because the higher your combo chance, the higher your heavy attacks will do. And heavy attacks with these guns or these melee weapons just absolutely destroy enemies. But the gunplates are quite useful, especially the primed version of Redeemer. And lastly, you have the Venka. Now, the Venka is quite cool. It has a hidden passive, where I believe it's also on the normal. It's definitely on Venka Prime. I believe it's also on the normal Venka. It has a hidden passive. It is the only weapon that can get a 13 times combo count. Every other weapon can only get a 12 times combo count. So the Venka can get 13 times damage out of its heavy attacks instead of 12 times. But I don't often know people that build this for a heavy build, but you could always try it if you wanted to. Moving on to Master Rank 5 now. We've got 3 primary weapons here. We've got the Ignis, which is a pretty cool flamethrower. This is one of the few weapons here that you will have to go to a clan to get. But I would absolutely recommend getting it because it is a very good weapon, and then there's an upgraded version later on that you can get. Next, you got the Com. It's the Heck is still stronger than the Com, but the Com can output bullets faster. How the Com works is you hold click, and the longer you hold click, the faster you shoot, up to a certain speed, obviously. But it just becomes like an automatic shotgun, and it's not too bad. You can build it for some damage, absolutely. And lastly, we have the Tonkor. That's like a grenade launcher. It's a single shot grenade launcher, so you shoot and then you reload, rinse, repeat. High damage, quite a good blast radius, easy for taking out groups of enemies. Again, at this master rank, it's really not bad at all. It's just that reload that would put some people off. For the secondary, this is one of my all-time favorite secondary weapons. I always recommend this to anyone that hits master rank 5, that being the Atomos. It's really, really cool. So it is a beam weapon, so it just shoots out a constant beam. And it will destroy enemies, and it will also link to other close-by enemies. So you can hit one enemy and then kill 2 other enemies at the same time if they're close enough to that first target. And it's got very, very high damage. You could use this to complete the rest of the star chart with just the Atomos. You wouldn't need anything else. It's really, really good. For melee here, we've got the Atarax, which is similar to the Lecta, but it doesn't do electricity damage. I think it's a high slash build. I haven't looked into this one. But again, it's a whip with a giant fucking mace on the end of it. The Castlear is another very strong staff. It similar to the Orthos, it's got some damage and quite a bit of range. You've got the Dark Split Swords, which are I've not used this in so long. I believe it's a sword, and then you can also split it into daggers, if I'm right in saying. Some of its attacks will split it into daggers and stuff. You can always play around with it if you decide to get it yourself. And then the Sidon, which again is just another staff. It's another decent staff that will do enough damage for you for this Mastery rank. Moving on to Mastery rank 6. The first weapon I've got here is the Soma. So the Soma is quite cool. It's another automatic rifle. But it's like the Com. It will slowly speed up the more you shoot. And it has something like 100 bullets in a magazine base. So it's like an LMG. It's good fun. Really, really good fun. And the other weapon I've got here is the Cernos. This is one of the first few bows you can get. You can get the Paris back way when. But I don't really recommend getting the normal Paris because it's not amazing. But you've got the Cernos. This one's not bad at all. It's pretty strong, especially for this mastery rank. And there are actually no secondary or melee that are worthwhile mastery rank 6. As I say, you can always have a look through yourself. If there's any weapons you want to get, you get them. You know, don't listen to me just because I tell you there's none worthwhile. There might be one that you like that's worthwhile to you. That's the joys of Warframe. It's all personal preference. Moving on to Mastery 7. First we've got the Hema. This is another weapon you'll need to go for a dojo for, as well as the Mutilus Cernos, which is the infested version of the Cernos. But the Hema is I think it's a burst infested weapon. It looks weird, but it does some damage. It's not bad at all. And then the Mutilus Cernos is just a stronger version of the Cernos. I believe it also does toxin damage, which makes it even stronger. Then you've got the Tigris, which is, it used to be the strongest shotgun in the game by far. But they've added other shotguns, and I believe they've also nerfed this thing as well, because it doesn't nowhere near as much damage as I remember. But it's got what's called a duplex trigger. So if you just click or press RT or press R2 or R1, whatever PlayStation is, if you just press it and let go, it'll shoot 2 bullets. Whereas if you just hold the button, it'll shoot the first, and then if you let go of the button, it'll shoot the second. And the Tigris has pretty high damage. It's one of my favorite shotguns by far. Not that I've used it in a while now, sadly. And finally, we've got the Tsar for Master Rank 7. The Tsar is a cannon. It, as you have guessed, shoots out cannonballs, which deal quite high damage. It has 2 fire modes, the main mode being the cannon mode, and the second mode being what's called, I don't know the name of it, but it's like a shotgun. So you can change it to a shotgun. The cannon mode is a lot stronger, but the shotgun mode can be used to pick off enemies really quick if you need, and you can also build it for the shotgun mode instead of cannon mode if you wanted to. Moving on to secondary, there's 2 here I've got, those being the Bolto, which is a single shot pistol, just your usual single shot pistol, and the Hystrix, which is Korra's main secondary weapon. Again, not a bad weapon. Not amazing, but not bad. Melee, we've got the Cost Assist, which is, I believe it uses scythe stances, if I'm not mistaken. It's a weird scythe thing with 2 like spikes sticking out of it. I mean, you've got the picture on screen anyway, you can see it. But you can also throw like toxic balls with it. It's quite a fun weapon to mess around with. It doesn't have amazing range, but it's not bad damage. It's worth a try. Next, we've got the Cerata, or the Cerata. I'm useless. This is a very, very useful melee weapon. So the Cerata is one of the strongest throwing weapons against the Corpus, and just about all thrown weapons are built for what's called a heavy build, as I've explained before with gunblades. Gunblades and thrown weapons, just about all of them are built for heavy builds, because you can throw them, and then you can use the heavy attack, whatever that is on your console or PC, and if you use the heavy attack after you've thrown it, it will explode the thrown weapon and deal heaps of damage, especially against the Corpus. Next, we've got the dual carries. Just 2 fucking big blades. Not much else to say about them. They're very strong. They're also Korra's melee weapons. And then you've got the Lacera, which is like a scissor. The Lacera itself, it's not bad. There are stronger versions of the Lacera, but it's always a useful weapon to have. It's good fun to try out as well. Master Rank 8. For primary, we've got the Exceltra. Now, the Exceltra is one of few weapons that you won't be able to buy the blueprint for from this list. That being because it comes from a certain mission on Sedna. There are bosses you need to kill in the... They're called Demolists. You need to kill them, and they have like a 2.5% chance to drop them. They are on disruption missions. So all you got to do is start a disruption mission, and then there'll be 4 towers. You've got to kill enemies until one of them drop a key. It's color coordinated keys, so put the blue key into the blue tower. And then a Demolist will spawn, and you've got to run to them and kill them, and they have a 2.5% chance every time to drop it. It's quite a low chance. I still haven't gotten this weapon yet. Next, you've got the Corinth. It's a shotgun with a second attack as well, so it's usual left click attack or RT or R2, whatever it is. It's just a shotgun mode, it just shoots, and then it's got its secondary fire mode, which is like a grenade launcher. So you press the button once to shoot out the grenade, and then you press the button again to explode the grenade. Quite a useful little weapon, and it can do high damage if you build it right. And then you've got the Lens, which is another weapon that comes from a dojo. This one is a bow. It's quite cool. It shoots out like a field. So you shoot an area and then it will hit like an AoE attack, an area of effect attack. and deal damage to any enemies in the area. Now, secondary, we've got the Icarius, which is the pistol version of the Exceltra. Again, gotten from that mission on Sedna with the Demolists, but it's two very strong pistols that have, I believe they have little explosions, and they shoot quite fast as well, so they're very useful. Now we've got the Akjigara. I just built the Akjigara Prime, and I've actually fallen in love with the weapon, so I would absolutely recommend the Akjigara. It's two pistols, they can shoot quite fast, you've just got to click for each shot, it's not hold quick, but they do alright damage for sure. Next, we've got the Cyclone. This is a cool little, it looks like a fucking Tron, spinny fucking wheel thing that you get when they throw at people. It's another beam weapon. It's not bad. There is a much stronger version of the Cyclone that I will explain at the end of this. But the Cyclone here, it's not bad at all. It's worth a try. And finally, you've got the Spyra for secondary. The Spyra, again, is another thrown weapon. A lot stronger than the Kunai and the Hiku. I believe it throws slower than both of them, but it's still worth a shot. Moving on to melee, we've got the Dragon Nikana, which, as I explained before, is the stronger version of the Nikana. You've got the Masseter, which is a giant, I don't actually know what its class has, a hammer, a sword, a mace. It's, the weapon is Grendel's weapon. It's very strong and does lots of damage if you can build for some attack speed. Next, you have the Sarpa, another gunblade. This one used to be meta for armor stripping. Things like Grenier, they have the yellow health bar. You could take that yellow health bar away and just make it a red health bar, which weakens them a lot. The Sarpa used to be one of the best weapons for doing that. It still does that, but nowhere near as much as it used to. But still a very, very strong weapon I'd recommend getting. Moving on to Master Rank 9, we have the Ignis Wraith for primary. Now this I absolutely will recommend to anyone that hits Master Rank 9. This is obviously the upgraded version of the Ignis, and before, the weapon was gained through an event, so clans could research it while this event was active, and after the event ended, it was no longer possible to research this weapon. So only clans that had researched this weapon could then go to their clan and get the weapon. The problem there being that people then started scamming new players out of the Ignis Wraith because they were getting it for like 15, 20,000 credits and then selling it for like 10 plat, which is an absolute ripoff. So now, thankfully, DE have introduced it that every clan now has the Ignis Wraith. So as long as you're in a clan, go to the Chem Lab and you'll get the Ignis Wraith in there. Very, very, very strong flamethrower. Build it for lots of heat stacks. There's builds online you'll find, because I'm not the best to look for at builds. I kind of give you mediocre builds at times. But absolutely, I'd get that one without a doubt. It's very strong. Next, you've got the Phantasma, my all-time favourite weapon. You will have seen it used in this video in the background here. It's another beam weapon. It has 11 bullets in a magazine. It shoots them in about fucking 0.3 seconds. Its reload speed is amazing. Like, there basically is no reload, it's just there and then it's not. And it outputs so much damage. It also has an alt fire mode. You can hold the alt fire mode and it will charge up an attack and then shoot out little balls that explode nearby enemies. And then it will also let off little orbs that will track enemies and damage them even more. I tend not to use that alt fire mode unless I'm memeing at like the end of a mission and waiting for people to come along. For the most part, I just hold left click and it just destroys people. Very, very strong. Next, you have the Ogris. It's a cool little rocket launcher. It does alright damage, and there is a mod that can make it leave like a field that does damage over time, and it can also damage enemies through walls with that field. The problem being they've nerfed AoE weapons. They can no longer, well, technically they can no longer damage enemies through walls, but there is ways to work around that. But the Ogris is still quite a strong weapon, and there is obviously a stronger version of the Ogris that I will explain later on. Moving on to secondary, you've got the Axamati, which is the pistol version of the Soma, the weapon that has like 100 bullets in a magazine and shoots faster the longer you hold it. These pistols do the same, so you hold left click, and they shoot faster and faster. Their damage isn't amazing, but with their fire rate, you can output some crazy amount of status effects. which will damage enemies over time. So it can still do some damage. Now we've got the Twin Roga. This was for so long my most used secondary weapon. They are very, very strong. They're more single target weapons. I wouldn't use them for like groups of enemies. I'd use it more for bosses or things like the Index. Very useful there. They do high damage, and they're just really useful. They're like pistol shotguns. They're cool. Melee, we've got two here. We've got the Legion, which is an amazing melee weapon. This also used to be one of my most used melee weapons. Outputs high damage. It has high status effect, and you can get its crit up. Not bad. It can be a pretty good hybrid build, but by far a very, very strong melee weapon. That one will also come from a dojo. You'll have to go to, I think it's the Bio Lab for that one. Next is the Volnus. This is Gaara's hammer. It's made of glass, but that doesn't mean it's weak at all. Fuck me, is it strong. Another heavy hammer. It's got some damage. It's not bad at all. I would definitely recommend working towards that. Now moving on to Master Rank 10, which is the last Master Rank we've got on this list. For Primary, we've got the Amprex, which is another dojo weapon you'll get from the Energy Lab. This is it's like the Ignis, but instead of fire, it shoots electricity. It will chain between enemies. It used to be a very, very strong weapon. It has been nerfed, but it is by far still very strong. Build it right. I still need to work on this one myself. I've got it built. I just need to finish modding it. But it's most beam weapons are pretty strong. If you keep that in mind, you should be alright. Next, we've got the Archoplasmor. When this released, oh my god, it rocked the whole Warframe world. It was very strong. It's a shotgun. This also comes from the Energy Lab in the dojo. This is a shotgun. It shoots a big, like, rectangular beam. So you click and it shoots it out towards enemies. And it's got quite a high range. And it does quite high damage. I'd absolutely recommend getting that one if you have the time. Next, you got the Istilla, which is also Gaara's shotgun. This is a glass shotgun. Its fire rate is not amazing. Its damage is pretty good, and its reload's kind of a pain in the ass at times. But it's not bad at all. Like, I'd absolutely recommend getting this one as well. And finally, for Primary, we've got the Daikyu. If you're a lover of bows, this is one of the stronger bows in the game. Its draw rate takes a little bit because the bow's so fucking big. But it's got high damage, and it's a very worthwhile bow. Moving on to secondary, there's two I've got here. One of which being Magnus. At this point, you're not going to find too many pistols that'll do high damage. The Magnus is just a recommendation because it looks cool and it's easy to use. And then you've got the Stat Core, which I've just recently leveled, and it's not bad at all, actually. It's like two gloves, like two fist things, and you can charge up an attack and then shoot it out, and it shoots out a ball that explodes and damages enemies, or you can just click and it shoots like a single target shot that will just hit an enemy and damage them. They're quite useful. I do plan to build them at some point because they're quite cool. Moving on to melee, there's quite a few we've got here. So we've got the Archititron. This is... Well, I can't say this because with Warframe there's always something that's stronger, but I'm going to say it. This is probably one of the highest damage output weapons in the game, if not the highest. It can one-shot any level Demolist. Demolists being beefed up to fuck and really, really strong. They have like heaps of armor and stuff. This thing is one of the few weapons that can one-shot any level Demolist. It has an attack. The more enemies you damage, the more damage it stores up, and you can use a heavy attack to output that damage, and that heavy attack can destroy Demolists. Very, very useful heavy hammer weapon. Right, I haven't put many prime weapons on this list, but if you can get it, it's expensive, and it's currently vaulted, so it's a pain in the backside to get, but if you can get it, I would 100% recommend going for the Glaive Prime. This, along with Nakana Prime, are one of the highest outputting slash weapons in the game, slash procs being one of the best procs to get in this game. So my Glaive Prime, for example, it is used in this video a couple of times. You might see it. I can hit an enemy for, say, a 60,000 damage crit attack. And that's not where the damage comes in. If you wait a second and then watch their health, it will do 300,000 damage tick with slash damage. And it can tick up to millions. The Glaive Prime is so strong, and you can basically just play the game with Glaive Prime. You never need to use another weapon again. It's actually amazing. I'd absolutely recommend getting that. It's my all-time favourite melee weapon at the moment. Next we have the Paracesis. You get this from, oh god, is the Chimera prologue or the Apostasy prologue? Anyway, you get it from a mission that takes about 5 minutes to complete. Not a bad weapon, heavy weapon. It has a cool passive, or not passive, but it has a cool hidden ability. It can actually be leveled up to level 40 instead of level 30. Every time you format this weapon, it can go up an extra 2 levels. So after you format it 5 times, it can go up to level 40, which is then its max level. So it can have 80 slots with an Orokin reactor, and something like 90 slots if you have the right stats mod as well. So it can have a lot more mod capacity. Next, the only other Prime weapon I've got on this list is the Redeemer Prime. The Redeemer is, just like any other Gunblade, very fucking strong. If you can build the right heavy build, it will annihilate any enemy that walks in front of you. It's so strong. I can never recommend this weapon enough. Absolutely go for it. And finally on the list, we have Stropha. Again, another Gunblade. Not as strong as the Redeemer Prime, but nowhere near as weak as some of the other weapons on this list. It's very strong as well. Gunblades are always strong. Don't worry about which ones are better, which ones are worse. Just get a Gunblade or a Glaive. They're all really good. But that's my list for 10 Master Rank weapon for the weapons for the 10 Mastery ranks. There are a couple extras. Those being the Kuva weapons, which I have in my Kuva guide, and the Tenet weapons, which are like the Corpus version of Kuva weapons. I haven't made a guide for that yet. I will get that. But the only difference is how to spawn what's called a sister. So you have a Kuva Lich, which spawns with the weapon, and then you have a sister, which would spawn with a Tenet weapon, which is like the Corpus version of Kuva weapons. There are, like, for example, there's the the Tenet Archiplasmor, or the Tenet Cycron, which are both weapons we've covered in this list. They are 10 times stronger than their non-Tenet counterparts, that you absolutely should work towards them if you get a moment. Next, we've got the Broken War and the Broken Scepter, and the Skiat Jati. So these three all come from quests. The Broken War comes from is it the Second Dream, I think it is? Yeah, the Second Dream. And then the Broken Scepter comes from the War Within. And then the Skiat Jati comes from the Sacrifice. These are all melee weapons, and all quite strong. The Broken War is probably going to be one of your most used melee weapons when you get it, because it's really strong and you could probably use it for the rest of the star chart. The Broken Scepter isn't as strong. It's a strong weapon, absolutely, don't get me wrong, but it's not as strong as the Broken War. But it's still not a bad weapon. And then you've got the Skiat Jati, which is a high crit Nikana weapon. Probably also a weapon you'll use a lot if you like it. It's got lots of high damage, and it's not bad at all. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my arsenal, and we will show you how to look for a weapon's blueprint and how to find whether a weapon is bought with the blueprint there and then, or if it comes from a certain place like a dojo or an enemy drop. So now that we're back in our ship, I'll show you how to check which weapons can be bought with the blueprints and which ones come from dojos and stuff. So you find any weapon you want. We'll go for the Cernos, for example, here. It'll show you all the stuff, its stats, so on and so forth. It'll show you how much it costs to buy with plat, and that it comes with a free weapon slot and an installed catalyst with it. And what you're wanting to look at here is the blueprint section. So obviously it shows you all the resources there, and then you can click on it and choose how many blueprints you want of the item. Most people are only going to take one because most people are sane. But then you can just outright buy the blueprint from there and then craft it with those resources. And then if we find another weapon that comes from a dojo instead, like the hammer for example, this is the weapon we talked about earlier on. It will show you here the resources, but it'll also say build requirements on the left there. and it will show you that it can be researched in the Bio Lab Dojo room, just above how much credits it costs to be crafted. I'd say about 99% of weapons on the arsenal, if not all of them. I haven't checked all of them to make sure, but just about all of them will show you where you get them from. Like, for example, the Etc. here, it'll show you the blueprint can drop from the Demolisher infestation on Grenier Galleons in disruption missions. Now, I can show you where that is. It's also actually Uranus. I did cover it over with that Uranus message on screen, but it's Ur on Uranus, the disruption mission you need to do. It's also a 1.25% chance to drop, not a 2.5% chance. It's, yeah, I probably should have done my research before I did the last part, but I'm not re-recording that, fuck that. But yeah, there's lots of other things here. Lots and lots of different weapons you can click on. It'll tell you which lab to get them in, or if you can buy the blueprint. Like this one, for example, the compressor. That comes from a certain syndicate on Fortuna. And it's click on any weapon you want, find out how to get it, and if you can't find where to get it, you've always got the wiki at your arsenal. The wiki is your best friend, and it will always help you if you need it. And then, as I explained before, there are certain Kuva weapons, like these ones. And then you can also get Tenet weapons, which are the Corpus version of the Kuva people. I so far have primary and secondary weapons. I don't have any melee weapons yet. But that is my guide for weapons you could work towards for the first 10 mastery ranks. Obviously, as I said before, these aren't weapons you have to get. They're just weapons I advise that are useful. Because I have lots of people asking me, you know, what weapon should I work towards now that I'm mastery so-and-so. But you will find weapons yourself that you like. You don't have to use these weapons and only these weapons. I mean, half these weapons aren't even that good. They're just new and something different, or something that's not bad for that mastery rank. I'd say a good 80% of these weapons you'll probably never touch again. Most of them will be mastery fodder. But at least it gives you a clear goal to work towards instead of wondering where to go next, what to do next. I actually kind of half fell asleep in this clip here. I kind of kept dozing off every now and then. You'll see me run into a wall or just stop moving, like there. I was tired. But that's it. I apologize for all the tongue clicking as well. I just did it there. My dumbass doesn't realize that it's annoying until after I watch this video back. But if you have any questions or are stuck with anything, feel free to shoot me a message in the Discord. I'll get back to you when I have a moment, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll see you all later.